which is very typical among the Christian religion. So everyone closes their eyes and bows their head, including my uncle. And as they're praying, the minister is saying, the standard, "Thank you, Lord, for all that you've given us. Thank you, Lord, for keeping us together, making us a family." Something prompts my uncle to open his eyes. And he's the only one who does. And in the flicker of the flame, my uncle said he was looking at the minister. And then he looked at the minister's wife. And as the minister was administering this prayer, the minister's wife, sitting next to her husband as he delivers this holy prayer, her eyes are open and slightly rolled back in her head. Her tongue is sticking out and moving wildly around her mouth. And he looked at her and he thought, she's mocking him. She's mocking her husband. She's mocking the Lord. And her eyes just sat there, white, tongue wildly moving from side to side without making a noise. No one else heard it. No one else saw it. My uncle just closed his eyes and pretended he didn't see it. Didn't say anything to anyone that night. Didn't say anything for a year or two until he told my mother and my father that story. He said, "It seemed to me that she was mocking God. It seemed to me that something was wrong with her." Now, obviously, the implication there is that she was possessed. Demonic possession is an interesting thing because it's something that the church, pretty much all churches worldwide, at least Western religions, have terms and cures and things to look for with people who are demonically possessed. And the scientific community goes, "Oh yeah, those things actually happen, but we think it's this medical thing." So it's one of those things that science can say, "We don't believe in UFOs." Science will say, "We believe that people can act possessed, but these are why they have this mental illness or this type of chemical poisoning or whatever." So it's not something that science dismisses out of hand. They also see these symptoms. They just think the cause is something else. As opposed to science just saying Bigfoot doesn't exist, UFOs don't exist, ghosts don't exist. They'll say, yes, people do act weird and they wag their tongues and they flip around and stuff like that. But it's not a demon, it's X. So they admit that the symptoms are real. The only disagreement is the cause. So I remember hearing those stories when I was younger. And I remember once, I'll tell this story real quick. This wasn't on the itinerary, but I'll tell this story real quick. I remember once, so I was really sick, and I was sleeping in my bedroom. Me and my little brother shared a bedroom, and this was about 87 when we lived in Alameda. I was sleeping in my bedroom, and I was really, really sick, so my father was sleeping in my little brother's bed to keep an eye on me. And my little brother was sleeping with my mom in their bedroom. My little brother wasn't doing too good either. I think we were both sick. And what happened was my dad, and there was a hallway separating the two rooms. Merrick, you can visit this house if you want to. It's right next to Alameda Baptist Church. Merrick's a listener. He lives in Alameda. So I'm sleeping in my bedroom. My father's sleeping in my little brother's bed. My little brother's sleeping in bed with my mother. And my dad wakes up early in the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning, and he hears the sound of a child crying. And he's thinking, oh, Christopher must be really sick. That's my younger brother. I can hear him crying. Well, I'm sure my lovely crying. And eventually my dad goes, I better check on him. So he gets out of bed and he leaves my bedroom and he goes into the hallway. And when he goes into the hallway, my mother is standing there. And they look at each other for a second. And my mom says, I thought Jason was crying. I could hear him crying. My dad just looked at her, then looked down towards the floor. And in between the both of them, they heard the sound of a child crying in the middle of the empty hallway at 2 in the morning. I remember the next night when we woke up, my father actually had a meeting with me and my brothers. And he says, listen, I gotta talk to you guys. He goes, this is what happened last night. I told us the story I just told you. And he says, listen, here's the thing. This is part and parcel with being in the ministry. You're going to attract these type of forces. These are things to look out for, boys. And like a father would tell a child how to, like, a Boy Scout, how to light a fire, or how to use a pocket knife, or how to catch a ball. The things that fathers tell their kids to help them grow as young boys. He sat us down and talked to us about what to expect. He goes, you don't have to worry anything about demons, they can't hurt you. You don't have to worry anything about ghosts, they can't hurt you. But these are things you may encounter in this house. Stuff may move around. You may hear noises calling from a dark hallway. You may hear things that will frighten you. But don't worry, you are protected. Interesting conversation that a father has to have with his boys. But he felt it was necessary. Now, I never experienced anything in that house, but I experienced things after that on my own. I remember once, now at this point I'm probably like 23, 24. I'm driving through Sacramento. I'm driving down Madison Lane, and I get to the Hazel intersection. So I'm driving down Madison, and it intersects with Hazel Avenue. Those are the two major thoroughfares through Orangevale, which is where I spent most of my time in Sacramento. And I remember sitting at a stoplight, and I see a car on Hazel getting ready to turn on Madison. And I'm looking at the car, and what draws my eye to this car, and this is probably just a normal day. This wasn't around Halloween, it was in the middle of the year. And I'm looking at a guy, and he's sitting at the intersection, and he's wearing a clown mask. Traditional clown mask. White face makeup, red nose, big red puffy hair. Normal clothes. He wasn't necessarily wearing a clown outfit, but he was wearing full-on clown makeup. And I'm thinking, that's weird. And I noticed there's two kids in the backseat of this car. Could be a guy going to a costume party in a weird time of the year. Could be a professional clown. I don't know. But his light turns green, and he starts to turn. Now, I'm sitting there, and as he's making the turn, he gets closer and closer to me. And I go, man, that's an amazing-looking clown mask. Like, look at those teeth. And that's when I realized that this guy isn't wearing a clown mask. He's wearing a monster clown mask. So, whatever he was trying to do, he was trying to be spooky. Full clown mask, and it had these large, razor-sharp teeth jutting from his gums. Now again, we've all seen creepy clown masks. It wasn't anything that struck me as odd. But as I'm sitting in the road and his car is getting closer and closer to mine as he's turning, I go, how does that mask look so realistic? Because as the car was turning, he was talking to whoever was in the car. And I could see, I swear, this is so bizarre, but I could see the musculature in his face. I could see the teeth move ever so slightly. I could see the gums recede as he spoke, exposing more of these sharp, needle-point fangs. And as he drove past me and I got a really close look at him, I realized that's not makeup. That's not a mask. The best Hollywood special effects could not make a man look like a monster as much as he looked like a monster. And I thought, the most disturbing part of what I'm seeing is the people in the back seat are not reacting to it at all. Nobody is. No one around me. No one's pointing. No one's looking. The children in the back seat are talking to whoever is in that front seat as if they looked normal. Now, could be they're used to seeing a man wearing a disgustingly realistic clown outfit in front of them. But as the car drove past and I could actually see the muscles of the cheek move realistically, incredibly realistically, in the way that the teeth and the gums and the lips pushed against each other as it spoke, I realized that is a human, but something else. And you're thinking, Jason, you just saw a man in a suit. But I saw something similar a few years later. I'm sitting in a drive-thru of a fast food restaurant. I'm just hanging out, waiting for my food. We didn't have cell phones. You just had to wait patiently for stuff. And I'm watching the people in front of me. Now, it's Sacramento, and Sacramento is full of weird people. But as I'm sitting behind this car, the passenger is talking to the driver. Normal conversation. You can just see them kind of moving their hands, gesturing, kind of moving their hands, talking every so often to look out the window, turn back to the driver, say a few more words. And the driver was violently and as hard as she could punching herself in the face. as hard as she could, as her neck twitched uncontrollably. I'm watching her head turn from side to side faster than is possible. So fast you could see the blur of her face as she turned to the passenger, then spun back, almost in a whiplash type action, and punching herself in the side of the face as hard as she could. It looked like someone in the throes of an epileptic fit. But what was very odd is, one, people who have that type of epilepsy don't drive their cars, and secondly, the passenger continued the conversation like there was nothing wrong. And every so often, she would turn towards the passenger, and I would actually see her head kind of get stuck in a spasm. It would go, and then snap back. And she would punch herself right in the face, sometimes right in the nose. Sometimes her right hand was just hitting her side of the head as hard as she could. And the passenger just continued to play with her hair as she looked out the window, turned back, and continued her conversation. So we have two incidents of me seeing something that's impossible. One is a incredibly realistic, clown-esque creature. No makeup, no mask. Nothing like that is as realistic as what I saw. And the people in the back not reacting to it in any sort of way. Maybe they are used to a creature in their front seat, or maybe he's a professional monster clown who can do on-the-fly special effects greater than any movie studio. Maybe the woman driving the car in front of the drive-thru was hardcore epileptic, and she just happened to be a good driver, and the person was used to watching another human smash her face in mid-conversation. Possible. Unlikely, though. Very, very unlikely. Now, all of this stuff, all of these stories, may seem unconnected. And maybe they are. But I think the issue is that because I could see them, they could see me. They could watch me and watch the expression on my face and see how I'm reacting to them, even though they appear human to everybody else. I believe they could notice that I noticed them. Because a while after that last sighting started the Lost Summer. The Lost Summer is a period of time when things got weird. Really weird. You know, it's funny, after I moved up to Hood River in 2011, that fall. Next year, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she goes, "You know what?" I swear to God she said this. She goes, "You know what, Jason? I get the feeling that you saved the world." I just kind of looked at her. Because as little memory as I have, I do know that something important happened during the Lost Summer. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be your email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. Twitter is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great weekend, and I will see you in 1 week. Thank you so much for listening to this show. Have a great one, guys. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio Classics, where I rerun old episodes, but with new intros. Now, this one, originally I wasn't going to do 5 classics episodes this week, but this is such a perfect way to round this week out. This is really my last major personal experiences story. In kind of a more recent episode, this is episode 308. But I had really been building up to this episode, and in a lot of ways I never thought I would tell this story until the last episode of the podcast. Such a bizarre and deeply personal story is it contained in this episode. Before I recorded this episode, maybe only 2 people had ever heard this story before. Because if any story makes people think you're a lunatic, it's a story where you meet an angel. Not only where you meet an angel,